Professor Subhayan. Yeah, right. Okay. So, welcome to this forum. Yeah. And Professor Toyama, you're there? Mute is not the point. There you are. Okay. So, we have another minute and a half. So, we will wait for another 90 seconds. So, Toyama-san, you are in Ann Arbor, am I right?
That's where I usually am, but I'm actually in Tokyo this year.
Okay, right. Okay, so wonderful. So this timing is much better than the Ann Arbor timing for
That's
this
true.
meeting.
Yeah, it's the middle of the night over there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Very nice. So how is the weather now in Tokyo?
It's beautiful, actually. It was a very hot summer, but it is cooling down slowly.
Cooling down. Okay, nice. I was planning to come to Japan in December.
Oh, okay.
Will you be there?
I'll be here. I'll probably be here if it's at least the first half of December. Yeah, it would be great. I'd be happy to get a tea or a coffee or something.
Yeah, that will be wonderful. Yeah. So you are working with which university there in?
I'm not officially affiliated with any university here. I've been visiting some, some colleagues here, but mostly, yeah, I'm on sabbatical from the University of Michigan, so I still have my job there.
Right.
Yeah. And
Wonderful.
my slide, I'll introduce my son. I wanted to bring him here so he could go to Japanese school for a year.
Okay. Right. It's a good to have a flavor of back home. Yes. Mm-hmm. Very nice. So is he enjoying it? The shift?
I think he's definitely used to it. We've been here since April, and he's not too excited about school, but he's adjusted.
Very nice. Yeah, that is very good to hear that. Wonderful. I think we are right on time. Can we start?
Sure.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's my pleasure to welcome you all, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to those who are joined from India and, of course, Europe. Good afternoon for those from Singapore and Japan. And, of course, good evening for those from North America. My name is Saideep Ratnam. I am the Chief Operating Officer at MIJSC at IIMB. Mizuho India-Japan Study Center, earlier known as India-Japan Study Center, is a center of excellence at Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. And we are delighted to welcome all of you to this webinar series, panel presentation webinar series. We call it Meijin Samvad, and translation is expert conversation. So you must have guessed that this is a conversation between two experts. And primarily it is designed to foster a discussion on a specific topic between two esteemed panelists. And the rest, who share these diverse perspectives on the subject with a large audience. So that is the objective with which we started this panel discussion series. We also have another series where only the experts come and present. So both are very popular. Our panelists generally are experts in their respective fields who provide valuable insights and high quality information in their own areas of management, technology, society, culture, and of course, geopolitics. But before going into the discussion itself, let me give you a brief introduction, first about the center and then about the panelists. Mizuho India-Japan Study Center, or MIJSC, as I said, is a center of excellence. But it was set up to serve as a facilitator for many collaborative initiatives between academia, industry, the government agencies of both India and in Japan in areas of mutual interest within these broad spheres. The focus of this center is to strengthen the India and Japan bond by promoting academic, industry, policy, and of course, societal linkages. So now, briefly, our first panelist, Professor Kentaro Toyama. He holds a W.K. Kellogg Professorship of Community Information, University of Michigan School of Information. He is a fellow of the Dalai Lama Center for Ethics and Transformative Values at MIT. And he is also the author of a very interesting book called Geek Heresy, Rescuing Social Change from the Cult of Technology. In fact, this is the book which attracted us to invite him to this session, because it is an extremely crisp as well as an eloquent book on the topic that is covered, and both at the same time. So I must say it's a must read for all of us. And in this, he argues that technology generally amplifies existing human forces, whether positive side or negative side, rather than being inherently good or bad. And his research focuses on social change and international development, with a particular emphasis on the impact of digital technology on society. Recent projects include applying the critical race theory to human-computer interactions, using digital storytelling for global maternal health support, and studying technology with the use of for the undocumented US migrants. And interestingly, Professor Toyama co-founded the Microsoft research in India. And therefore, he has some degree of familiarity with India, as well as, of course, Japan and the US. And he started technology, and emerging market research group within that. And he is known for innovative projects like multi-point, text-free user interfaces, digital green, and so on. He has a long list of achievements, but I will just talk about one more aspect before I stop here, because he has, of course, served, he co-founded the International Conference on IEEE and ACM's International Conference on Information and Communication Technologies and Development, ICTD as it is called. And he has served as a co-editor-in-chief of many journals, including Information Technologies, International Development, etc. He is a PhD in computer science from Yale and a bachelor's degree in physics from Harvard. He was born in Tokyo, raised in Japan and in the US, and he currently, I think, shuttles between Ann Arbor and Tokyo. Our second panelist, Professor Shubhayan Mukherjee, he is an assistant professor at the National University of Singapore, and he specializes in online audience behavior. He employs computational methods like statistical inferences, network science, and online experimentation to study how people consume information, especially on the digital platforms, which are proliferating these days. His research has been published in most of the top international peer-reviewed journals and is featured in renowned media outlets across the world. At NUS, he teaches quantitative methods and data communication to both undergrads as well as to professionals. But before joining NUS, he did his PhD in communications from USA, University of Pennsylvania, and he holds a bachelor degree in computer science and master's degree in maths from BITS Pilani. So he has also got a strong Indian connect. So Professor Mukherjee has professional experience in software and analytics industries across the world. And he has previously worked as a research fellow at the University of Pennsylvania and also has some links with University of Oxford and Harvard University as well, especially Harvard University's Berkman Klein Center. We are truly fortunate that two such luminaries, Professor Kentaro Toyama and Professor Shubhayan Mukherjee, have agreed to join us today to share their experiences and their insights. The panel presentation for today, so very highly anticipated webinar, is how might AI reshape society? Global case studies, including Indian and Japanese experience. So both of them are familiar with both these countries. So, but before I request them to take over, let me set the context for this choice of this subject. Like the introduction of the printing press, electricity itself, and more recently, internet. Artificial intelligence, or AI as it is known as, it looks to be poised to profoundly transform the way we live, the way we work. And in a rapidly evolving technological landscape, the potential impact of AI on society, we can never understate that. As we are standing at almost the cusp of AI-driven era, it becomes increasingly important to understand how AI is reshaping our world. I'm sure all of you are as keen as I am to explore this. So let us embark on this journey of exploration and discovery as we go into the fascinating realms of AI's influence on our lives. This webinar will throw light on the various facets of this ongoing revolution. One of the central themes of our discussion today will be revolving around how AI technologies are altering the dynamics of human and AI collaboration, and investigating the integration into industries such as customer services or content creation or even research. we also delve into the economic transformation, cultural implications, and also the evolving the landscape of education and workforce development. Please join us for this insightful exploration as we will draw upon some case studies based on their rich experience, which may include India and Japan case studies, to understand holistically how AI will affect us all. The structure for today's session would be presentation by each speaker between 15 and 20 minutes each, followed by a discussion with the moderator, which is myself. And that will be followed by a Q&A from all of you, which will be another 20 minutes. So, but do not wait for it. If you have a question for any of the speakers, please use the chat box to enter your question. So without further ado, let me ask Professor Toyama to start his presentation or his sharing of thoughts. Over to you, Professor Toyama.
Wonderful. Thank you for that kind introduction, Sadeep-ji. And I hope everyone can see my slides. Could somebody also enter something in chat? I just want to see if people in the audience are able to add to chat. It looks like Deepak was able to do so. But anyway, so I want to thank you. So I'm going to start with a brief personal introduction. I was just with my family in Kamakura in Japan, which was a previous capital of the country. And as you can see in the background, this is the Buddha. And, you know, I was delighted to be invited to this seminar and was very glad to hear that there was such a thing as the Mizuho India-Japan Study Center, because I think our two countries have a lot to share, and that has gone on for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Of course, the Buddhism remains very influential in Japan, and most people believe that they are Buddhist to some extent. And then this is my son, 8-year-old son, who is here with me in Japan as well. His mother is Indian. She and I met when I was in India working at Microsoft Research India. And he is now in the process of going to a Japanese school where he's trying to learn Japanese. But so for both personal as well as larger societal reasons, I'm very happy to be here. And I'll talk a little bit about how AI specifically applies to the Japanese context towards the end of my talk.
Thank you.
So I spent a little over 5 years in India trying to find different ways for digital technology to impact rural and inner city urban development in the country. And we did projects in agriculture, healthcare, governance, and so forth. And out of all of that, I learned a single lesson about how digital technology can actually impact society. And to put it in this very simple form, it's that for the most part, technology amplifies underlying human forces and only amplifies them. And what I mean by only is that it is not a net addition necessarily, nor a net subtraction, net negative. Ultimately, what it does is amplify the human forces that are already there. And what I want to do over the next few slides is provide some intuition for this. And I'm going to ask everybody to respond to very simple questions in chat. So the first question is this: which of the following groups most often completes massive open online courses? These are the free courses you can find online. And feel free to add in chat which one you think it is, A, B, or C. A is jobless high school dropouts, that's secondary school dropouts. B is motivated working class people, people who have very low income. And C is college educated professionals. Okay, I see a lot of B's, I see a couple of C's, and a couple of A's as well. The correct answer in this case, based on a lot of data that MOOCs themselves have collected, is C. B is a good guess. You would expect that the people who most benefit and who most want to complete these courses are would be the people who are earning relatively little and are trying to gain more. But it turns out that they're not the ones who complete these classes. So the next question I want to ask, and again, please feel free to add responses in chat. Why would it be that college-educated professionals, and I'm going to guess that most of the people in our audience are college-educated or are currently being educated and will become professionals. Why do you think that people like us are the ones who most often complete these courses? Any ideas? Some people say job opportunity, they have stable jobs and disposable income, upskilling to stay relevant. Yeah, all fill in the gap of knowledge, recognize value to keep relevant. All good responses. I'll also mention that people who have gone through a lot of education are exactly the people who know how to learn on their own and are therefore able to absorb the information that's in MOOCs. They're also often the ones who have both the time and the energy to do it. So, if you're somebody who has to work 12 to 14 hours a day just to survive, you're not going to spend the extra hour or two you have before you go to sleep doing mathematics problem sets, for example. So, for a variety of reasons, it's the people who are already educated who get an advantage. This is Sebastian Thrun, founder of one of the world's best known MOOCs. And he says the basic MOOC is a great thing for the top 5% of the student body, but not a great thing for the bottom 95%. In other words, people who are already rich with education are the ones who gain more from MOOCs than otherwise. Okay, question number 2. Okay, in which of the following countries is democratic free speech most available online? And before, again, I'm going to ask you to respond, pick A, B, C, or D. I'm going to say this is not a trick question. So you should not have to think very hard about this question. Okay, so I see a lot of Ds. That D, of course, is correct. Now, the next question, why? Why do you know this? I'm going to guess that none of us have been to North Korea, and yet we suspect that there's not a lot of democratic free speech available online in North Korea. Why do you suspect that that's the case? Again, let me ask for responses in chat. And thanks to all who are responding. Familiarity from press reports, Twitter, open communication, less online presence, based on our knowledge about these countries. Right, so what is it that we know about these countries? Well, North Korea, we know, is a very highly repressive regime in which even offline, if you say things that are critical of the government, you'll end up imprisoned. China has a vast censorship machine, and in fact, they're very effective at removing content that they don't like, either in print or online. Russia, until recently, was actually relatively open, but they also had an army of people who were hired to just spew propaganda, pretending to be regular people. The United States is very free in terms of its speech online, and that's because they have laws that protect free speech offline as well. So the overall lesson, and this is a photograph of the North Korean supreme leader speaking probably to his generals, and you can see that they look more than anything, they look pleased just to be in his presence. The lesson here is that politics shapes technology more than technology shapes politics. In the early days of social media, there was a lot of hype about the internet bringing freedom of speech to other countries, but in fact, that has not been borne out. All right, third question and last question. Imagine you're the CEO of a for-profit corporation that has a good product, but it's not meeting its sales goals and losing money. Which of the following is most likely to improve the situation? A, create a new strategy. B, replace weak performers on the leadership team. C, provide more training to sales staff. Or D, buy state-of-the-art laptops for all employees. Or D, E, upgrade the data center. Or F, subscribe to the enterprise version of ChatGPT. I'm not going to ask everyone to enter their responses, although you're more than welcome. Usually when I ask these questions, everybody laughs by the time they see D, because it seems ridiculous that buying laptops is going to be the thing that makes a difference. And I've spoken with many people in Silicon Valley who are CEOs themselves, venture capitalists and so on, and they all agree that what makes a difference in terms of a company is not the technology it uses, but the leadership team and the management. So the overall lesson here is that ultimately, the technology that people use is not the critical thing that makes an organization succeed. Human beings make the important decisions, including about technology. And again, if you put all of those things together, there is a very simple way to explain it, and that is that technology's primary impact is to amplify underlying human forces. I'm going to really drill this point home now at a larger scale. So this is a graph of the US rate of poverty on the bottom in the green line. And if you had extended this back to 1945 or so, you would see that that green line was declining all the way until about 1970. And since then, the rate of poverty has stayed flat, which is quite embarrassing for one of the world's most wealthy countries. And this is in spite of the fact that we have had a whole range of digital technologies. In fact, you could say that we've had a golden age of digital innovation in the last 40, 50 years. And these technologies are not just things that we know exist in theory. They're now in the hands of many, many people. In Ann Arbor, I live very close to Detroit, where a lot of the people there are without jobs or otherwise very low income. And they all have iPhones and they all use Facebook, but it hasn't changed their economic situation much. In talking about something other than economics, political polarization in many parts of the world is only increasing. And this is despite the fact that we now have so many different ways to communicate with each other. In the early days of social media, there was a lot of hope that with more ways to connect, we would understand each other better, we would empathize more, and eventually we would come to a greater consensus. There would be world peace, things like that. If anything, the opposite is happening. Most of us now only hear or choose to listen or talk to people who already have similar opinions as ours. And so if anything, we are growing farther and farther apart. So again, what's happening is that the technology is amplifying underlying human forces. Now, amplification, if you believe it, has many different corollaries. And I'm going to focus on this one here, which I think is most relevant for our discussion, which is that technology in many contexts is predictable in terms of its impact on society, as long as we thoroughly understand the human forces in that context. And of course, AI is a tremendous technology. I will say that probably within our lifetimes, we're going to see what futurists call the singularity, the point at which computers match human intelligence in every way and begin to exceed it. And I think it's called a singularity because it is very difficult to understand what might happen on the other side. But until that moment, I believe we have enough of a grasp of human society right now that we can predict at least in a general high-level ways, how AI is likely to affect the world. So we live in a world in which, for example, income inequality is growing in most regions, within most countries. It turns out that it's not growing overall in the world, largely due to India and China and the sheer number of people who are coming out of poverty in those two countries. But nevertheless, it is growing within, and even the growth of China appears to be slowing down, and so we'll see what happens. And so income inequality is growing, and I expect that that will continue with AI. At the same time, we are depleting the world's resources and polluting the atmosphere. Climate change is happening, and those things are not slowing down at all, despite lots of people working on them and using lots of fancy technologies to do so. And then finally, we have a consumerist culture. This is, of course, Tokyo, and what I'm always surprised by is just how much there just seems to be a lack of trying to search for a larger goal other than making individuals more comfortable and not really happy necessarily, but more comfortable and locally satisfied. And so with all of that, my predictions for AI are really that AI is basically an incredibly powerful multiplier, and over time, inequality will become worse. We'll talk a little bit later, I think, about jobs and so on. Sustainability will become harder. One of the facts about AI is that it consumes incredible amounts of digital resources, and so the power required to enable AI will suck in more and more energy and power, a lot of which will be fossil fuels. And finally, people will become even more complacent. We're already very good at keeping the average person very locally happy in their everyday lives. AI will make that even more so. And so my real hope is that we will soon encounter some kind of significant crisis that will wake us up as a civilization and hopefully change things in a very dramatic way. I want to talk a little bit about Japan and the context of AI. Generally, it is, I think, quite visible, even just from regular news, that Japan is currently lagging in terms of AI, despite its previous leadership in technology, both in terms of manufacturing and electronics. In AI, it's not one of the leaders right now. In fact, I think there are, easily, in addition to the United States and China, Europe as a whole is probably way ahead of Japan in terms of actual AI capacity and implementation. But the technical capacity is there. Japan has a very high degree of an educated population. And I think the real question is whether, as a country, it is able to really invigorate the business environment here, both in terms of overall economics, but also in terms of entrepreneurship, which seems to be muted. I also think that Japan has a tremendous opportunity for kind of moral leadership with respect to issues around AI and technology, but whether it will take it or not is an open question. One thing that is true about Japan is that many things do work very, very well here at the average level, but when you get to the leadership, it's not clear to me that they have very clear visions of the kind that will really translate to global leadership. So with that, I'm going to stop and just summarize that overall technology amplifies underlying human forces, and I believe that that will be true with AI, at least until the singularity. If current social trends continue, which I see no indication that they will not, AI will increase inequality, make sustainability harder, and keep people, all of us, more and more complacent. And ultimately, in an age of intelligent machines, culture and policy matter even more than before. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very interesting, many counter-intuitive observations that you have put down in that book of yours and in this short presentation. We will come back to many of these things after we hear from Professor Shubhayan.
Okay, so I'll get started now. So thanks for firstly inviting me, right? I maybe should share my screen. 1 second. All right, do you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So yes, good morning, afternoon, evening, all at once to everyone, depending on where in the world you're joining in from. So I'm Shubhayan Mukherjee, and I'm an assistant professor at NUS in Singapore. I would like to begin by expressing my deepest gratitude to the Mizuho India Japan Study Center for inviting me to share my thoughts with all of you today. Special mention to Mr. Ratnam for hosting this. It's really an honor to be here. I thank you all for attending the session. And I couldn't have asked for a better presentation to precede mine than Professor Toyama's, because I think it laid it was an excellent kind of a general more than AI, it was about, general tech determinism, what we call, right? About technology in potentially transforming people's lives or not, as he would argue. So I'm going to delve a bit deeper into some of the AI aspects that I think will provide fodder for the discussion later on. And I think it'll be useful to think of all of these aspects that I talk about through the lens of what Professor Toyama just said, right? And I think, so my take is going to be slightly complementary in that I won't necessarily be talking about general things about technology, but about specific ways in which maybe we can see an impact of AI in our daily lives. All right, so the way I've organized this presentation, which I hope doesn't go beyond the stipulated time, is around 4 critical dimensions that AI touches upon, each offering a glimpse into the potential transformations and challenges that lie ahead. The first is trust and AI. The second is creativity or art and AI. Then I'll talk about education and AI. And finally, and perhaps of most concern to the vast majority of us, jobs and AI. And finally, I will touch upon what is one of AI's biggest challenges and one that isn't really talked about enough, which I think, which Professor Toyama also mentioned, the carbon footprint of AI and what it means to live in a rapidly heating world or world in the throes of climate change and developing, such massive models that can potentially exacerbate these problems, right? So there's a fair bit of heated debate around AI, about AI in the world today. And so I want you all to engage with curiosity and openness. So a lot of the nuance gets lost in these flame wars, right? So, okay, let's get started. So when we think of AI and trust, traditional science fiction depicts a scenario where humans cannot trust AI because robots created by humans refuse to remain subservient to them. And there is no better example than this iconic scene from 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? Now, whether this will happen or not, we have to wait and see. But the way things have gone so far has raised concerns about a different aspect of trust in the context of AI, right? In March of this year, the world witnessed what was ostensibly the first instance of an AI-powered deepfake that went viral. Hyper-realistic photographic quality pictures emerged of Donald Trump being arrested and put behind bars. The US Senator of Virginia, Mark Warner, was quoted in the Washington Post saying, policymakers have been warning for years about the potential misuse of synthetic media to spread disinformation and more generally to sow confusion and discord. So this takes us to the question at hand, does the advent of AI signify the demise of truth? Now, as we move deeper into this digital age, discerning what is true from real is potentially going to get harder. So once deepfakes go mainstream, what can we believe anymore, right? So that's what the popular media covered. That's what it'll kind of that's the narrative they go with. The authenticity of information is increasingly under scrutiny, creating a landscape where trust is eroded and potentially a lot of skepticism prevails. So what do we do when we can't trust what we see? And in a context like India's, the implications can be manifold. The proliferation of deepfakes can potentially fuel misinformation campaigns, exacerbate communal tensions, and undermine the democratic process in what is the world's largest democracy. So it requires us to kind of respond with a robust digital literacy program where individuals are equipped to the skills to critically evaluate the veracity of what they see online. In India, we have this problem of WhatsApp forwards and spreading a lot of misinformation through that. Now, how they do that is a different issue. And no technology exists thus far that can reliably spot a deep fake. So it becomes imperative for us to kind of develop mechanisms that can effectively combat this problem. Now, of course, this means collaborative efforts between governments, tech industries, and civil society. But more generally, there are no easy answers, right? The least we can do is begin a discussion and bolster existing institutions to face this challenge. And this will be a recurring theme throughout my slides, that I'll talk about how each of the aspects in which AI may influence our lives will require us to potentially, rethink how we have our current frameworks today, right? So let's now move on to the realm of art and creativity. Here we see some images generated by DALL-E, the revolutionary generative AI platform that came out last year to a lot of fanfare. And in this case, DALL-E was prompted to generate images of Kermit the Frog, painted in the style of the Norwegian artist Edvard Munch. And thanks to this and so many more similar such tools that have come up since then, it has stirred some apprehensions about what it means to be creative anymore. What does it mean to make art? Many fear that the rise of AI might herald the death of art and creativity as machines take over the roles traditionally held by human artists. However, if history serves as a guide, we can potentially anticipate a different trajectory. So this is when photography was invented in the 19th century. It was perceived as a threat to the traditional art of painting. The ability to capture reality with unprecedented accuracy led many to believe that the essence of artistry would be lost. As this article tells us, published in JSTOR Daily, critics weren't just wringing their hands about photography, they were actively deriding it. They saw photography merely as a thoughtless mechanism for replication, one that lacked that refined feeling and sentiment which animate the productions of a man of genius. And this was in 1855. So, and the author went, as long as invention and feeling constitutes essential qualities in a work of art, photography can never assume a higher rank than engraving. Now, we all know that didn't happen, right? Now, whether it's higher than engraving or not is up for debate, but it's certainly considered a fine art today. But that doesn't mean that traditional art became obsolete, right? It evolved. Painters began to explore new avenues of expression, giving birth to new movements of art, such as modernism, postmodernism, surrealism, and so on. And art became more of an intellectual exercise than it was before. Right? So the quote from this article is pretty interesting, that it says, photography couldn't qualify as an art in its own right, the explanation went, because it lacked something beyond mere mechanism at the bottom of it. And if you think about a lot of the criticism we see about generative AI art today, there are a lot of echoes that kind of sound similar to this. So similarly, as we potentially stand on the cusp of what many are calling an AI revolution or whatever it is, we are not witnessing the death of art or creativity, but rather its transformation. artificial intelligence, which is ability to analyze and replicate patterns, can serve as a tool that augments human creativity, not replace it. Artists collaborating with AI, pushing the boundaries of what is possible, right? And then artistic talent then is not just the ability to, skillfully move a brush on canvas, but just like it began to accommodate something like, positioning a camera and framing, finding the right frame, and playing with white balance and zoom, right? It could also evolve to include something like coming up with the correct prompt to do what the artist wants, right? And just last week, this new style of painting, geometric scenes, not painting, art, geometric scenes using AI has gone viral on social media. And if you simply search for AI art and spiral on Twitter, you'll find a whole slew of artworks that looks like this one on the right, on the two images on the right. Now, is this a new art movement? No, obviously not. But it doesn't matter, right? It's just allowing people to be creative in newer ways. And that's the whole point. But hang on, you say, isn't AI art stealing from the works of other artists? Because AI models are trained on works that are often copyrighted material, right? So what do we mean by intellectual property anymore? And these are questions that challenge the very foundations of how we think of creativity and ownership today. So specifically, the pressing concern is whether AI is facilitating the theft of copyrighted material. As AI systems are trained on vast data sets, which include copyrighted works, the lines between inspiration and infringement become increasingly blurred. Now, historically, artists have sought inspiration from the works of their predecessors, a practice that had fostered innovation and the flourishing of diverse art forms. And the process of drawing inspiration, however, is often nuanced, right? It involves a deep understanding and appreciation of the original work, and subsequently adding a personal touch or a new perspective to it. However, the scale at which AI can replicate patterns and styles found in existing work poses a new set of challenges, right? Is this fundamentally different from artists being inspired by other artists? Or is it just occurring at a pace that we haven't seen in the past? Is it the scale that's kind of giving us the jitters, right? Again, there are no easy answers. And go back to my earlier point about our institutions. I think this is something that our existing institutions, legal frameworks, are woefully lacking in the face of such conundrum. They don't know how to deal with this, right? And so I think it means that all of these must change, must respond to these changes that are happening in society. So now let's turn the page and consider the education sector, which I think everyone will agree has a crucial role to play in shaping the future of almost any country, or of all countries, I would think. Now, in India, with the burgeoning population, the traditional public school system often finds itself stretched thin, unable to cater effectively to the educational needs of every child. Now, we have seen ChatGPT, right? And I'll talk more about the issues about cheating that come up with it. But before that, I think conversational AI in general, its ability to engage students in intensive learning experiences, can potentially bridge the gap in the current education system. And I know that in a previous talk, and Prof. Toyama talked about how new technology means that people who are already using, who are educated, they're the ones who will most likely be using it in the future. And I think that's a very valid point. But we have seen in India with the recent growth in the digital penetration, how the digital technologies have really reached India, like the rural heartlands of India, right? I mean, I'll talk more about the kind of the payment mechanisms that have come up in India of late that have really changed how people pay. And this doesn't happen just in the cities or among the wealthy, right? It's happened. So if you go to an Indian village, you will see people using their phones to pay, using scanning QR codes and all that, right? And so I think that it depends on the context where it's being deployed. And even though in developed countries, things may happen slightly differently, I think that the scope of this really, changing how education happens in India. But I'll talk more about what, the government, what the public sector can do to kind of make this a reality, right? And this isn't just some vision that they have for the future, because it's already being used by Khan Academy today, right? I would urge you all to look up this thing called Khan Migo. It's like a conversational TA that Khan Academy has, that you can just ask questions and you'll always have someone to clarify your answers about the content that you're learning. So again, wait up, you say, you must be asking this question now, what about cheating, right? What if students cheat? Doesn't generative AI make it easier for students to cheat in exams? Perhaps it does, right? But isn't that distracting us from the real question? As an educator who wakes up to news about GPT-4, yet again passing another difficult exam with flying colors, shouldn't we be asking ourselves, what are we even teaching? How are we testing our students and preparing them for the real world if this shiny new tool can just come up all of a sudden and pass exams with flying colors? And I like to quote my NUS colleague here, Professor Jonathan Sim, who writes, as educators, we often ask if our students are ready for the future, but how often do we ask ourselves if we as educators are ready for the future, right? And so there is this move in NUS also right now, where we are trying to, we haven't outlawed ChatGPT, where we want students to use ChatGPT in their learning, because we know that they will be using it when they're working after graduation as well, right? So, so just as I foresee generative AI opening up newer avenues in the world of arts, I see educators of the future using generative AI as a helper, as a teaching assistant, if you will, in designing newer learning activities to prepare them for the future. So I teach programming to social science students, and I don't worry if they're using ChatGPT to write code quickly, because at the end of the day, that's how they will be writing code in their workplace. So why should I prevent them from using ChatGPT if it feels a bit defeatist to me to not allow them to use it, right? So AI as a practical aid, preparing students for real world professional environments, I think it's kind of important that students, keep using these things in the classroom. In some other ways, however, there are some downsides, especially in the context of India, where, if I'm not mistaken, we have 22 official languages. So it's a country of massive linguistic diversity. And the deployment of LLMs, or large language models, in education and other sectors, while it holds a promise of efficiency and innovation, it also harbors a risk of fostering a more Anglo-centric society, right? Because most of these LLMs are trained in English. We converse with ChatGPT in English, right? And this can, result in the local regional languages being overshadowed by the dominance of English. The shift not only threatens the survival of marginalized languages, but also risks alienating a significant portion of the population who may be more comfortable speaking in their own vernacular, right? So this underscores the urgent need for AI development that is equitable and inclusive, and one of the more conscious effort to preserve and promote the linguistic diversity. In the Indian context, this means developing AI models that are proficient in regional languages, ensuring that the digital future is accessible and inclusive, resonating with the linguistic fabric of the country. And we can talk more about, in recent developments, the Indian government introduced a notable initiative last year named Bhashini. I'll skip over it for now and maybe talk about it during the discussion when it comes up, all right? So it's basically about how an LLM can be a public good that can be offered in local languages that people can use to kind of reap the benefits of it, even if they don't understand, don't speak English, right? Okay, now let's talk about the last concern that we hear most often being echoed in the context of AI, and that is jobs, especially in a country like India, where the sheer scale of the population amplifies the consequences of technological advancements. Currently, India grapples with an unemployment rate of around 8%, which translates to more than 100 million people seeking employment, right? And so there's a lot of trepidation about AI replacing human labor in the country, right? People in India, Indian workers, they fear losing jobs to AI and all that. I'm sure we'll talk more about it during the discussion, but essentially these apprehensions aren't unfounded, and there are concerns, and there always has been whenever new technology comes up, right? I remember I grew up in West Bengal in the 90s India, and where when the computer was first introduced in the government sector, there were like strikes, and people were just, no, we don't want computers in the workplace. These are taking our jobs, and we used to have strikes every other day of the week, right? And so I can see parallels, if not that pronounced, happening now, at least in like in the narrative that we see online. And this is true. But it's also essential to consider the fact that AI will create some new job categories that we cannot yet envision, right? And again, I think the internet, the computer, the industrial revolution, these are all kind of precedents. It could usher in a new era of employment opportunities, where there are new jobs that we don't have right now. Think of prompt engineers, AI ethicists, AI auditors, and these are just the ones that have come up in the market in the past year, right? As the epithet goes, AI won't take your jobs as much as someone using AI will. All right, so I think I'm going to park the topic now, because I'm sure we'll have questions about this and we'll talk about it in the discussion. But I want to really focus on the final aspect of AI that we cannot simply overlook: the environmental implications. The burgeoning growth of AI is intrinsically linked to an increase in global carbon footprint. So first you have big tech corporations which reap enormous benefits, often relying on a pretty exploitative machinery that extracts rare earth minerals from the global south and other vulnerable regions of the planet to build chips and microprocessors. And to add to that, you have the massive amount of computing power needed to train these languages that they're building. Language models that they're building, which are ostensibly exacerbating the ill effects of these processes. And so to illustrate the magnitude of this issue, consider the training of GPT-3, right? The AI engine that powered the earliest version of ChatGPT. This process resulted in carbon emissions equivalent to the yearly emissions of 112 petrol car or gasoline cars, as they're called in the US. In India, a nation that has recently surpassed China as the world's most populous country, the stakes are even higher. The population is predominantly young and rapidly digitizing, and India stands as a huge market for AI in the imminent future. So the manner in which AI integrates with Indian society, particularly the number of people who stand to begin using these tools on a daily basis, will not only shape the trajectory of the nation, but also will have profound repercussions globally. It is therefore incumbent upon us to transition to this AI era with a sense of responsibility and foresight. And it should be guided by principles of sustainability. I know it sounds easier, that it's easier said than done, but it really does call for efforts between governments, industries, and civil society to foster the development of AI technologies that are, not just advanced and efficient, but also environmentally conscious and green. And more importantly, it beckons, it demands global dialogue where nations come together to address the environmental implications of AI, creating a future where, we can use AI in a manner that's effective and doesn't offset our ability to live a comfortable life. That said, there are some interesting and emerging perspectives here on this that I'd like to talk about, such as how generating an image using Midjourney actually has a less carbon footprint than a person using Photoshop to generate an image, if you look at a per image basis, right? So there are some recent findings that I've been reading on some research papers that have come out recently, right? So I'm going to talk, we can talk about this in discussion, but it's still a very important thing to consider and to keep at the back of our minds as we talk about AI. To quickly summarize my thoughts on which this is all headed, I think it's foolish to try and stop AI development, like some people like Elon Musk have been advocating, like stop development for 6 months. I think that's not going to happen because Pandora's box is open and AI is here to stay. And so it will have consequences. So it's all about being able to move towards responsible and sustainable AI development. So when we talk about AI, how it impacts the world, it's easy to fall into one of these camps, right? AI is the same old, it's a flash in the pan. It's just like some technology that came up and it disappeared without anyone really adopting it. Or AI will be the end of us, the doomerist perspective. Or AI will save us all, the very often naively optimistic perspective. And there's also this other take, which is AI is fundamentally different from all new technologies that preceded it, that will profoundly change our lives, societies in ways we cannot envision. And the comparison with the internet is the most obvious one. Yes, it was very different from all technologies that profoundly change our lives. Thus, even if we think that AI is something that can be like that, it's important to consider the ways we cannot envision it. So 20 years from now, we might as well be looking at this deck of slides saying, boy, did he get everything wrong? And yes, I acknowledge that. The manner in which an interconnected complex system, that is the human society, responds to a new stimulus like AI will certainly be unpredictable and with unintended consequences. So, I mean, my kind of view is we should not go overboard with our predictions and speculation, and we should try to kind of, not fall into these scams that we often see appearing online about, anything really these days, right? So, and with that, I'd like to wrap up my presentation. I think I may have gone a bit beyond the time, but apologies for that. But I look forward to the discussion after this. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Shubhayan. I think you have, after the counter sort of intuitive elements that Professor Toyama brought in, you gave more also some earthy examples in these 4 key elements, which I think all these 4 key elements are major concern points for people, and this is both a, as you said rightly at the end, it's a god as well as a bogeyman. So very nice presentation, but let me explore a little more. So I'm Professor Toyama's view. Yeah, AI is an actor which is sort of impacting society at large. Can you shed some light on some new advances in AI that influence people's environment and actions, not just processes and systems? Can you share your thoughts on this aspect?
Sure. I'll say, first of all, that I think it's really important in these kinds of discussions about the future to be clear about the time frame that you're talking about. I mentioned the singularity, which I think we are around the corner from the singularity.
Right.
And I will say that I believe in bullet number 4 of Professor Mukherjee's previous slide, which is to say that the singularity is truly, truly, truly a unique event for human civilization. Similar to, I would say, the invention of nuclear weapons, right? Prior to nuclear weapons, we invented all kinds of weaponry, and each time we thought, okay, this is more, it gives somebody an advantage, but it's really more of the same. But with nuclear weapons, what happened was it suddenly became possible for us to end human civilization, which was not true of any previous type of weapon. AI, when it gets to the singularity, is of a similar, if not greater magnitude. We have never, as human beings, ever encountered an intelligence that matches ours, right? Whether it is animal or machine. And so when that moment happens, it is truly, truly, truly a unique event. And I think that point just cannot be overstated. Having said that, until that happens, I think we're still in a world in which this is an incredibly powerful technology, but still largely predictable in the sense that, to the extent that we understand underlying human forces, they're predictable. So how will this AI change society in the nearer future? I think the biggest thing is we're going to begin to see all kinds of applications in which it becomes harder and harder to tell whether there is a real person behind something or not. So just for example, already, if you use, various email systems, I'm sure many of you have seen the thing where the email, as you're writing the email, it gives you suggestions. Would you like to say, just sounds good, and end the message, right? Or sometimes it's a little bit longer. And that kind of system is just going to get better and better and better in the near term. And pretty soon what's going to happen is there are going to be systems which write the whole email for you. And then the person you're writing to is going to have their email written. And there will be entire conversations that start to happen where you're not even really aware of the details. And who knows, something might get negotiated for you without your full awareness. I'm already dreading the moment when my students start asking me, they're sending me these emails that ask for, I really deserved an A+ because this is what I did in assignment. And of course, my natural inclination is, okay, I don't want to deal with these emails. Let my AI handle it. And next thing I know, it's going to be grading for me. I don't have to worry about grades, et cetera, et cetera. So those kinds of things will happen. And I think that will be an interesting kind of societal shift. I don't think it will be all good or all bad, but the extreme ends will be severe and strange. And the question is, how will we adapt to that kind of world? I think in the same way that there are some severe problems with social media, as well as some significant benefits, we'll see something like that with AI as well.
Excellent, excellent. If I may be slightly provocative, if you wish, you did say that technology amplifies something which is already there. But you also said something about the AI reaching a point of singularity, because as by definition, on the other side of singularity, none of the existing knowledge may work. So would you rethink on this aspect, that the impact on society is unknown? rather than that it is maybe only amplification.
Right. So, a mathematical singularity is, it is when whatever trend happened before it completely breaks down, right? Like if you divide by 0, it is very different from dividing by 0.00001, right?
Yeah.
And so on. And so that's the nature of a singularity, is that it is fundamentally rearranges things so much that you really cannot use whatever past trends to understand the future. If I would say, about the singularity, I would say that Professor Mukherjee's on his last slide, we can't say post-singularity which of those things will happen. The world might end, or computers might take over and make our world, supremely good for human beings in a way that we don't understand right now, or something completely crazy might happen. We just don't know. I mean, one way to think about it is, even in our regular lives, we often meet people who are, let's say much smarter than us at something, right? And we can't really understand what they're thinking. And so sometimes they may say things or do things that seem completely strange to us. And in the same way, an AI that really is beyond human intelligence will be impossible to predict. And then in addition to that, because of the incredible amplifying power, I think a lot depends on initial conditions. So,
Right.
Whether such an AI is born out of a lab at Google or at Meta or in some government office, and also who specifically were the engineers involved in it, all of those things will make a difference. And so, yeah, it's really fundamentally unpredictable.
Thank you. I think so. Would you? Because we are at a point of unknown dynamics may have kick in. Would you then, though Professor Shubhayan did say that Musk's approach of stopping research is non-workable, but since we are approaching that cusp point of singularity at a very fast pace, would you tend to agree with Musk?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll say whatever Elon Musk says, he's obviously not doing it because he is investing as much in AI through Tesla as anything else. I mean, he's not heeding his own advice. I do agree with Professor Mukherjee that it is unworkable because of global politics. So for example, the United States will never give up on AI innovation because they're afraid that China will eventually beat them, right? Which is a situation that they don't want. And so on. So, and we don't have a world government that is going to dictate what everybody's going to do. So I completely agree that it is politically an unlikely situation. Nevertheless, yes, if it were up to me and I could wave a magic wand and stop all AI innovation, I would do it right away.
Okay.
I don't think we are ready for it. I don't think we are regulating even the existing technologies we have in a way that's healthy for overall human society. So until we can demonstrate that we can do that, I don't see that to be honest, I'll put it this way. I don't think we as human beings deserve the upcoming technology.
I think that is an excellent answer. What would Professor Shubhayan respond to that?
No, I mean, I agree that, the way AI is kind of, I mean, if you think about it, we haven't seen any technology really gain the level of adoption that something like ChatGPT has gained in the history of humankind, right? It's never happened. So it's pretty mad to think if this is what we have seen in the past. It's been what, 1 year, less than a year. If this is what we've seen in 1 year, then what could happen in the next 10, 20 years, right? It's mind-boggling, which is why I think it's kind of pointless even speculating about it at this point.
Right.
And yes, our current institutions are just woefully lacking to deal with existing technology, right? And I mean, just watching those videos of the House hearings of Mark Zuckerberg or someone will just tell you how clueless the people really are about how something like even digital ads work, right? They have no idea. And so I think it's, I mean, if I had a magic wand like Professor Toyama, if like the one that he listed, I would not so much as stop AI. I would just wish, people in power or politicians or policymakers, they just could just become a bit more literate about technologies and just, understand how these things work, so that we can at least have some space for a safe innovation instead of just going full speed at this, right? And I think so the general point I want to make is that you need institutions to rise to the occasion for this. I mean, you cannot. I mean, AI won't stop. So how else do you regulate it, right? Yeah,
I get it.
Yeah. So that would be my wish. I wish everyone could just become like magically digital literate enough to know how a basic machine learning algorithm works. That would kind of make everything nice for everyone, I feel. But
I think the long and short of both your answers is that we need many magic wands. So, but considering that we can't cross or predict what comes on the other side of that singularity, let us assume that singularity is a little away, a little far away. So you did mention about the impact of the AI on the job market globally. But I was reading reading some research recently, which said that in the three years time frame, there seems to be no global job market impact. And something like that, you also mentioned that. But this could, of course, be due to adaptation lags, and also the time taken to implement, et cetera. But I would like to ask both of you, starting with Professor Toyama, what do you think in the longer time frame, longer than 3 years time frame, what do you see in terms of generation of new jobs? Will it be generation or it will be a loss of jobs?
Yeah, so until very recently, mainstream economics has believed that with new technology, there are new jobs, and that you don't have a net destruction of jobs. And I would say for the most part, it looks like the world has borne that out. But again, AI is unique, right? In the following way, it is, it will increasingly begin to be able to do what we previously thought only college-educated people could do, such as write legal contracts, or write computer code, or write certain kinds of text and so forth. And with each such capacity, it potentially demolishes an entire industry. And I want to make one thing clear. There's often this claim that, if a computer can't do the whole job, then jobs will not go away. But that's not really true. All you need is a computer that can amplify one person who's good at that job. Let's say it suddenly allows one person to do the job of 10 people. Well, that's 9 jobs that a company doesn't have to pay for. So, there's some very obvious ways in which this will begin to happen. So, for example, if we get to the world of driverless cars, which we seem to be, again, right around the corner from, truck drivers no longer needed. Taxi drivers no longer needed, right? In America, that's several million jobs that will just vanish almost overnight as soon as that infrastructure and political policy realm is put in place. We are already seeing without significant AI, a loss in retail sales because of the centralization of retail sales through online commerce. And so I don't see that, that trend, we're not in a world in which that trend has any significant resistance. So I do think in the in the medium term, I think it's way too early to talk about whether ChatGPT will replace jobs, because we're just still learning about its real capacities. But yes, I think even within 10 years, we'll begin to see certain classes of jobs go away. And yes, there will be some new jobs, but I don't think that those new jobs will increase in number. What we'll begin to see is a whole class of white-collar work gradually going away.
Disappearing, yeah. I think Would you respond to that? What is your view, Professor Shubhayan?
Yeah, I agree that that AI is again potentially something different than anything that has come before. So it's not like a computer, which it might look like it takes away some jobs in the short term, but then once people begin to upskill and become computer literate, it kind of makes more jobs available out there, right? That's what happened with, say, with software in the US, in the world, in India specifically, right? So I think in this, there's a bit of an edge for younger societies, and I say that because India is one of the young countries, right? Because the median age is like 28 or 29 years. And so they're kind of growing up in the thick of this revolution, this AI revolution or whatever it is, and they're so attuned to technology that it's almost like many of them, could be a second language almost, right? This may make it a tad easier for them to adapt and evolve along with the advancements of AI. But it's not just about the young folks, right? I mean, in general, I think society needs to, again, very trivial statement to make, but society needs to adapt. That includes the workforce. They'll need to adapt to be able to use AI. And I see this kind of in Singapore. The government is doing a pretty stellar job at rolling out initiatives to educate the older population with new technologies, because Singapore is also kind of a aging population, right? And so I've been involved in many of these webinars, and I've seen like people like much older than me in their people have retired from the workforce. They attend these webinars, try and know what is data analytics, what is AI, what is machine learning, and all of these things. And it's kind of I don't know if that will translate to them getting jobs or something, but in general, I do think that there is a need for people at all, in the workforce to fundamentally change to remain relevant in the context of this new, what alien thing that has come up, right? So yeah, so I mean, it's hard to say whether the jobs will go or not, or whether more jobs than fewer jobs. But there needs to be some change in how people are, picking up new skills, right? Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you. I think both of you have answered it very well. Just one question, which because Elon Musk keeps coming up in any such discussion because he is very voluble about it. But what he says also makes a lot of sense, because he says, when I speak to any of the policymakers, they just don't understand. And the systems in most countries, maybe a country like Singapore is different, but larger countries like the US and in India, the way the policymakers, the government works in order to bring in these laws which will restrict or control is very convoluted. The process is very, very complex. So in this, other than a magic wand, is there any other way the triple helix, which Japan talks about, the businesses, the academics, the policymakers, how can they collaborate? Or is it just a mirage? Professor Toyama?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question. I think it really depends on the circumstances, the context. Speaking for the Japanese case, I'll say that, this country did very well through the 80s in a number of different axes, including at innovation and obviously economically. But I think a lot of that momentum was carried through from the post-war years in Japan, and a particular generation was basically, they felt it was their mission to do these things, not just that it was their job, or not just because it made them rich. And I will say that when I was in India, in the previous decade, that I felt the same kind of energy and drive in India, and that kind of energy is really what I would say is missing in Japan right now. And I do think it takes a combination of, people with money making the right kinds of investments, but also the government encouraging entrepreneurship. What's happened in Japan right now is that basically there is actually a lot of entrepreneurship at the mom and pop level. like you can walk down any street in Tokyo and there are a gazillion little stores, all of them doing amazing things, but they're tiny. And then there are a number of very large companies that are doing generally very well. And if you're associated with those companies, you're also doing very well. But the middle sector exists, but is not able to break through. And what I think Japan needs is more companies who are able to become one of these, bigger corporations. For whatever reason, it's hard. I have to say, I'm not enough of a scholar of, of what makes business succeed to understand why that is. But I think that's the challenge in Japan.
Thank you. And Professor Shubhayan, does this triple helix model of Japan, which is much talked about, you have the policy, the business, the academia working together to create, it seems to have worked, as Professor Toyama says, it seems to have worked in the earlier generation. But in the context of AI, do you think this will work?
So maybe I'll talk from a more Indian perspective, whether this can, how this can work or not. We've all, especially those who have been in India the last few years, have seen especially after COVID and even before that, the whole thrust towards, digitizing services, right? And it's actually, and I wanted to talk about it. I mentioned that in my slides earlier. I think the government has a role to play in how this initiatives roll out and whether they're really accessible to everyone. And because India still suffers from relatively lower internet penetration compared to the developed countries, right? So which is why I brought up Bhashini in my presentation, right? So Bhashini, so in a place where the English-speaking crowd is relatively small, it's like it's kind of leveling the playing field. So it's not doing anything flashy, but making sure that more people can get to grips with large language models in their own languages, right? I think it's a fairly thoughtful approach. It makes government services a bit more approachable for folks who might have been left out because of language barrier. So I'm wondering whether instead of really doing a huge kind of a collaboration between the three sectors, it are these small things that make people first comfortable with using AI in their daily lives that can maybe have more important ramifications downstream, right? So the first thing is ensuring the person who in some random village in Bengal doesn't know anything about any of this, right? And if you really want to be like a digital superpower, then we need this to be available to them. And if you think of the India stack that has happened over the past few years, it's been this quiet powerhouse that has made subtle but kind of powerful waves of change in spreading digitalizing the country, right? So if you think of the scale of verifying identities of 1.4 billion people, and then the UPI payment, it's kind of remarkable that something like that doesn't exist in the US, right? So for those who are not aware, not from India, so if you have a bank account in India with another bank, you can just send money to anybody else with another bank account without any intermediary, right? And this is now being seen everywhere in India, right? Even in the hawkers in villages, everyone's using their phones to pay, and they've been brought under the formal economy, right? And so, I think it is possible for something like Bhashini to kind of integrate with this India stack, as they call it now, to make this LLM accessible to everyone, so that once everyone starts using it, we can then start to think about once we start using it as a public good, not as something that we are all using it for curiosity or for fun. Once they can use it as a public good in these different ways that it's already seeing implementation in India, right? In like the railways, there is I think a customer service happens through this app now, which is driven by an LLM, right? So once people get more comfortable with using this, then we can talk about the more lofty goals of collaborating with big industry and government sector and academia, right? But I think first in India, that is some time away. First, we need everyone to first start becoming familiar with this new technology, and I think once that is done, we can consider how these big initiatives can take place. So that's my view.
I think, very nice. In fact, you are sort of agreeing with Professor Toyama in the sense that what he was saying is that we have still not understood the power of whatever technology that we have and not harnessed it adequately. So where is the question of AI sharp or cutting edge features? Because we let us go slow. I mean, it is not possible, I know, but I'm saying basically his hypothesis is go slow, because first harness what you have. And that is exactly what you are saying. All these Bhashini and UPI are examples of harnessing the existing technologies rather than going into the cutting edge side. I think that seems to have been the consensus that seems to have evolved. And truly appreciate your participation. I know there is a lot of things, a lot of questions, and the singularity seems to have, a concept of singularity seems to have triggered quite a bit of concern, if you may call it that. But I think it is a reality, and truly appreciate your expert opinions on all this. And we will be sharing this with, if you are okay with it, we will be sharing your email. Just wanted to check with you whether that is okay with you or not, because then the participants can ask you some questions which we could not cover it during our brief talk. Is that okay with both of you? Fantastic. Thank you. Can you just key in the, it will be in the chat. The emails will be there in the chat. Just one last point, if I may. With many of our, one of the initiatives that this center is doing is that at this webinar level, we have some good insights, good discussion. Now, if we take it a little deeper, so that all these three people, the triple helix people involved, can benefit from some actionable points. So we want to make a working paper out of it. And some of our research associates working in the center would like to work with both of you to convert this into a working paper. And we'll be very grateful if you can also give your thoughts on that paper as and when it gets done. Thank you. Is that okay with you, Professor Toyama?
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to be involved in such a thing. I'm not sure that I will be able to invest as much time as to be a co-author, but yeah.
Yeah. I know your views on it. Yeah. Thank you. And Professor Shuhan?
Yeah, similar. Yeah, so I won't have a lot of time to actually work on the paper or something, but I can put my thoughts on it. Yeah. I
know both of you are extremely busy people. Appreciate your participation today, and also giving your critical views on some of the working papers that we may generate from this. Truly appreciate, and namaste.
Namaste. Thank you very much. It was great to.
Thank you.